Going live, preparing to stream our meeting. I want to welcome everybody. It's so nice for us to be together live here on Zoom and also on YouTube. We're going to be joined today by two very special guests, Shari Silver and Sheryl Behar, sisters who are going to share some awesome recipes with us today. And I have to say, I'm excited about the recipes, but I'm also excited about the sibling banter that we're going to hear and some of the awesome stories that Shari and Sheryl have for all of us. So I'm going to introduce the ladies by adding them to our video screen today. I'm going to take my video away so you can see them nice and big. And ladies, whenever you're ready, you could take it away.
Great.
Okay.
Go ahead, Jack.
I am not the cook for Passover. I am more of I'll make the commentary and talk while Sheryl is cooking. Sheryl is an excellent cook, and for most years, for as long as after our grandmother passed, Sheryl hosted Pesach both nights, the Seders, and she really kept our family together, and she always experimented with recipes. So I hope that if you attempt the recipes that Sheryl's going to show us, you enjoy them.
And I am coming to you from Florida, which is a Passover experience because I'm used to going to the 5 towns to do all my Passover shopping, where you know there are stores full of groceries and stuff to buy, and all the things you never thought were kosher for Pesach are kosher for Pesach. In Florida, you're lucky if you get like 2 shelves. I was going to take a picture of the supermarket, but I forgot to take my camera there today. So it's slim pickings. I did find one kosher supermarket a little bit away. I was able to get some more stuff. But Passover was always really a special holiday for me because I love being with my family, and I was the next generation after my mother and her siblings, and we would always do Passover at my grandparents' house. My grandfather was observant, and my grandmother never left the kitchen. And the kitchen was, I don't know, probably 9 by 14, enough for maybe 2 or 3 people to stand in there. And she managed to make dinner for all of us as we sat in the living room, listening to my grandfather read Hebrew, and got the nasty look, the evil eye, if we made too much noise. So now my family, the modern group of us now, we try to make each other laugh as much as possible while we're reading. And I am going to focus on dessert, because that's the other thing in my family. We do traditional food for Passover, but it seems that everybody needs to bring a dessert. So we end up, after everyone says, no, don't do too much dessert this year, we always have way too much dessert. And one of my brother-in-laws always complains that the Jews don't get it. We have matzah and we have dry cakes, and Christian people have chocolate bunnies. And somehow we need to update our menus to compete a little bit better. So I'm going to try to do kid-friendly desserts because I thought that would be easy for everyone. They're relatively quick to make. And as you put some of these things out after cooking, if you turn around, they're going to disappear. So I always try to hide the cookies because someone comes into the kitchen and then inevitably goes, aren't there any cookies? Aren't there any cookies? So I need to hide everything. I'm going to start with macaroons. Macaroons the homemade macaroons are nothing like what you buy in the store. They're not as sticky, they're not as sweet, they're not as gooey. They're much more clean tasting macaroons. So I'm going to start with 3/4 cup of sugar. Everything's all measured out so I can start easily. 2.5 cups of unsweetened coconut. And sometimes it's hard to find unsweetened coconut this time of the year, but try. I find that if you use the sweetened coconut, it really comes out way too sweet. But if you're stuck and you can only get the sweetened coconut, cut down on the sugar. Instead of using 3/4 cup of sugar, I'd probably go to 1/4 cup of sugar. 2 large egg whites. A teaspoon of vanilla extract. And you can use, if your favorite is having a little almond flavor in it or a different flavor in your macaroons, you can substitute the vanilla for any extract, really. They all work. I've tried them with several different extracts and they all come out good. And a quarter spoon, I'm like having an Ida moment. This is like really weird. A quarter.
Yes, I'm very impressed. You're all like ready, and you definitely are, Ina.
A quarter of a teaspoon of salt. And this one doesn't need a mixer, so I'm just gonna mush it all up.
Now, Cheryl, do they have flavored coconut flakes, like a vanilla or, you know, something that's already has the flavor built in?
I have never seen that. I always see, there were a couple of other coconuts, but with other stuff in it this year, but I'm a traditionalist, so I stick with the plain coconut ones because that's kind of it. And what we'll do is we'll dip the macaroons into chocolate at the end, and you can be a little bit more creative in what you dip them in and what you coat them in. So I've got sprinkles, if you want to put sprinkles all over the top of the macaroons, or just stick to the chocolate coating. So you mix them up and it comes together. And on a parchment lined cooking sheet, I'm just going to take them by the spoonful and hoping they come together. You have to kind of mush them. It may need another egg. Okay. Another egg white probably wouldn't be a bad thing in here. If you wait a second, I'll get another egg white.
I'll chat.
So Shari, tell me a story about these macaroons. How did they come to be?
When we grew up, my grandmother, now I don't remember so much about Brooklyn, and I have one memory of Brooklyn, but my memories came after my grandfather passed away and my grandmother moved to Flushing. So I would go to, there was one year where I went to my grandmother early and I was helping her with her baking. She was cooking for the Seder and I was helping her by cracking open the walnuts, you know, crack 3, eat 1, crack 3, eat 1, and helping her get it all together. She was such a good baker, and Sheryl takes after her. So we have the recipes that were my grandmother's, except you can't decipher them. It's a measure of this, a touch of that, you know, baking is a science. And so Sheryl has gone to classes, she has traded recipes with people, and she has a whole binder of recipes. And as good as my grandmother's baking was, and I remember the sponge cakes, and Sheryl can duplicate them, but better. They're moister, but you know, I was young with all of this, and my grandmother made mandelbrot, and Sheryl just worked towards upping the game, and she came across recipes as she went along, whether it's the brownies, and every year we show up for a Seder and Cheryl's like, I tried something new. I have a new recipe and this is what we're having. And, you know, other family members would come with the store-bought cakes and they would be left over, and whatever Sheryl makes disappears.
Cheryl, are you going to make your own cookbook one day?
You know, I have so many recipes, and I keep saying now that I'm retired, there were two things. One of my bucket list things is really to make my own haggadah. And while I was down during COVID, I started, but I started too late, and it's a big deal. There are a lot of templates online at hagoda.com where you can get humorous templates and serious ones, and I really wanted to do that. My recipes, I am starting to clean them up and really figure out the ones that I like and the ones that I've never made and will never make, because I don't like things with too many ingredients or that take too much work. So that is definitely on the bucket list to do soon. The one thing about my grandmother that I remember, and I have the pan at home, when she made a sponge cake, she made it in a pan that I forgot what they call the pan with it. It's the bottom, and the bottom with the tube comes out. And she used to hang the pan over an empty beer bottle until it loosened up so that the cake kind of dropped. And that's such a strong image of that cake hanging on that pan that I took it and I have it. I don't know how to use it. One day I'll figure it out. Okay, so we got these all ready to go in the oven. Let me see if I can show these to you.
Notice you're making more ball shape, not flat, like cookie shape.
I am making like balls.
Yes.
Can you see? I think you can see those.
Yeah,
right?
we can see them nicely. They look great.
Okay, yeah, it needed that extra egg white. Let me just, the coconut, if it's too dry, really needs an extra egg white.
It's
Okay.
funny because when, Sheryl started doing a lot of baking for Passover, we would go in and, like she said, you had to hide it, but you inevitably found a thing or two and we would pick. And I do remember when I was a little girl and getting to my grandmother's apartment, and she had all the desserts lined up in what was my uncle's bedroom. And so, even before dessert, before we sat down, everybody would go in there and sneak a little piece and taste this, taste that. That's just how our family is.
All right, so I put it into, I preheated the oven to 375. And they're in the oven, and as soon as they're a little bit brown and coming together, we'll take them out and then I'll dip them. In the meantime, I'm going to do the brownies. I have to tell you, this recipe came, I worked with an Orthodox woman, and we did something for Passover. She either brought in food or something, and I tasted these brownies, and they were like, whoa, those can't be kosher for Passover brownies. She goes, yeah. I said, because they were really moist and really chocolatey. So these now are my go-to Passover brownies. And they are relatively easy. They are very sweet, but they're really good. So 4 eggs. Large size. Ina says you have to use large eggs for baking. So I use large eggs for baking. A cup of oil.
It's not the holiday for those of us with high cholesterol.
All right, it's 2 cups of sugar. If you don't like them really, really sweet, again, I typically cut my sugar in most of my baking. I usually cut it by about 1/4 cup to 1/2 cup because I don't like things that are overly sweet. But the recipe calls for 2 cups. If you want to go to 1½ cups, I think it would not make any difference. What is important is the cocoa, and I'm using dark cocoa because you need that really good strong cocoa flavor. So it's a 1/2 cup of cocoa in the bowl. Potato starch, 3/4 cup. And I don't like nuts in my food, especially in my baking. So there are no nuts. If you like nuts, go right ahead.
And go nuts. I said, if you like nuts, then go nuts, right?
Go nuts, whatever you like, right? Any kind of, walnuts or almonds, whatever you want to put in. The other thing I thought about putting into the brownies, it would make it sweeter, but it would be fun, especially for kids, is chopping up a bunch of marshmallows and having little pieces of marshmallows in the brownies, because they're kosher Passover marshmallows.
Right.
And here we go.
Probably also use like little chocolate candies like M&Ms, because then the little colors will come through, or I don't know if maybe sprinkles would work to add some color too.
Yes, in our family, Justin loves sprinkles. You can add sprinkles to anything.
That's right. Rainbow sprinkles puts a smile on everyone's face.
Yes.
Sheryl, have you ever used a sugar substitute in your baking, like a stevia or a Splenda or any of those kinds of substitutes?
I didn't hear the whole beginning. Do I use substitutes?
Have you ever used any kind of sugar substitute in your baking, or are you a purist when it comes to sugar?
I'm a purist when it comes to sugar, and I believe, but I'm not certain, that the consistency and the content of what the substitutes are changes the nature of the baking, because as Shari said, it's very much a science. So I think that would need to be researched if you wanted to do that. So I stick with sugar. And if you look at the bowl, it's a really rich, dark brownie base.
Beautiful color.
It's great. I'm gonna pour it into the pan.
Are you making these for us?
You know, we have to talk about that because you're gonna have to get stuff for me to do it.
Yes.
These are really good.
Do you have to grease the pan or anything, or put
No,
anything
this
in
one
the
does
pan?
not use a grease pan. Oh, it does use a grease pan. I didn't bake it. I didn't grease the pan. Screw it up.
There is a theory in our house, in our family, for desserts, by the way. You know, we talked about all the desserts. It's 2.5 desserts per item on the Seder plate.
This is a great rule. I like this rule.
I usually
One time I tried to go with one dessert
Okay,
for a family get together.
not good. Okay, and through the magic of baking in Florida, let me show you what's gonna happen. They come out of the oven already cut up on a plate.
Wow.
Insert commercial here.
So
Amazing.
they're nice. You can see it's a nice glossy top. The sides of the brownies come out with that nice crisp crust on them, and they're delicious. I got an A+ rating from my husband on these.
All right. Sheryl, do you have a preference of the edge, the corner, or the inside piece?
You know, that's a good question. I really love the edge. I like that crunchiness. The inside is really moist, sticky, and gooey. The bottom line is I really like them with vanilla ice cream on them.
Ooh, all right.
These, in fact, the brownies are carved because there is no butter in them. So ixnay on the ice cream business, except if you're going for a different meal. But for after Seder, they're really good, and you can eat them because no butter, carved. And see, it took once you get all the stuff in the bowl, it doesn't take very long to make them.
How long do they typically take to bake in the oven until they're done?
Okay, these took a while. This is an hour. And I was making it last night in my convection oven, which usually shortens the time. And I cut it the shorter time, but it still needed the hour to get for the finish to be done on them. So yeah, I would say an hour to maybe even an hour and 10 minutes, depending on what.
Have you ever put a glaze on top of them, or do you find that they're sweet enough? You mentioned that they're a pretty sweet batter to begin with.
Yeah, I don't like glaze or frosting on any of my baked goods usually. I usually do cakes without frostings also. So the brownies, I wouldn't do. The only thing I would put on them is ice cream or whipped cream.
All right.
Okay. And the last item, let me just check on those macaroons.
Don't burn those macaroons. They look delicious.
I'm gonna, Shari, talk while I rinse off the blades from the mixer.
Shari, so I'm going to ask you that same question. Do you like the middle, the edge, or the corner of your brownie?
I love the corner. I also like the crunchy. So when we make brownies here, I actually have to fight Brian for the corners.
I love that. There was a bakery that I lived nearby, and they individually wrapped their brownies and they labeled them center, edge,
really?
and corner, so that you get to choose what type of brownie cut you wanted when you got a brownie from that bakery.
I
That's
love that.
great.
Love that idea. As a marketer, I love that idea. Okay.
When we're upstate in the Catskills, there's a bakery that I go to pick up fresh bread, fresh baked goods, and they do these really delicious brownies. They know me well enough. When I order brownies, they give me the corners and the edges. And if I order cupcakes, they remember to put sprinkles on them for Justin.
Awesome.
Before I start making the cookies, there's one thing that I invented a couple of years ago. I cook my own gefilte fish. So it's not a dessert, but this is something that is a really cool thing to eat, especially for lunch. I cook my own gefilte fish, and my family calls the carrots and onions and the liquid from cooking everything schmutz. So, it depends on how much schmutz do you want with your piece of fish. At the end of a Seder, or when I make fish, usually I have a lot of schmutz left over because I cook a lot of onions and carrots when I make my fish. I've invented mushu gefilte. I take the schmutz, which is like the pieces that have fallen off the fish, into the pot. So it's little pieces, and then it's carrots and onions in the liquid, and I roll it up in a lettuce leaf. And you could put you could probably get some type of a sauce in a store if you wanted to put it on it as well, like a little hot sauce or sweet sauce or something. And it really is a very nice appetizer. Mushu schmutz.
She happens to make the best gefilte fish.
It looks like we need another episode of gefilte fish with Sheryl.
Yeah.
Okay. Cookies. This is the longest, messiest recipe that we've got. So it starts with, it's 2 sticks of butter, which I softened them up in the microwave. 1.5 cups of brown sugar. Again, my rule. I followed the recipe with 1.5. I found them a little bit sweet. So if you went to a cup or 1.25 cups, I think no problem. Honey. 2 tablespoons of honey. Tablespoons of honey.
I learned a little trick from our last cooking episode. If you take a cooking spray and you spray your measuring utensil when putting the honey in, it slides right out because of the oil from the cooking spray.
I'm glad you said, I've heard that. I've never tried it, but I have heard that before, and I thought about it, but I never did it.
It's an interesting trick. I've only tried it once. It was pretty interesting.
It comes out better than that, huh?
We have a special guest that joined us, a third sister.
A third sister. Is she going to turn her camera on so I can spotlight her as well?
No.
What's our third sister's name?
Cindy.
Cindy, are you there in Zoom world? See if she'll start her video.
Yep, there she is.
There she is. Cindy, can I put you on screen? Give me a thumbs up if I can put you on our screen.
But whatever.
Cindy, can I put you up? Hello, say hello, everyone.
Hi,
If we keep going
everyone.
long enough, we'll have a 4th sister coming on.
We don't know if she knows how to use Zoom, though.
There we go.
Cindy, we were just talking about your grandmother and all the amazing baking that she did.
Yes, her Passover cake has never been duplicated. Her mango bread. Miss all that.
Sheryl can duplicate that cake.
The mango bread was beyond it. I've must have tried a dozen recipes on mango bread, and some of them they're acceptable, but they're not like my grandmother's. Okay.
Because you don't use an old sour cream jar for measuring.
Jelly jar that I saved.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm going to take your video off so we can get back to these amazing chocolate chip cookies. Feel free to add your commentary along the way.
Will do. Gotta find a place to put my phone now.
All right, Cheryl, what are we adding to this big bowl you have in front of you?
Okay, so far we have the butter, brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of honey, 2 teaspoons of vanilla. This was a quarter of a teaspoon of kosher salt, 2 large eggs. And I'm gonna mix. I'm gonna mush up the butter a little bit so it's makes some sense, and the eggs, I try to just kind of mush it down.
Now I see she's using a hand mixer. If you were to use a stand mixer, would that work as well? Or do you prefer a hand mixer because that's what you have for Pesach? That's the shake of the head. My mother only used a hand mixer for Pesach because that's what she had. That was kosher Pesach, right? She had the hand mixer put away, and the stand mixer was used for all year round.
I don't think Sheryl has a stand mixer.
Maybe
Right,
not in
Jen?
Florida.
Oh,
She's mixing. That's why we're chatting.
I don't think that she has a stand mixer. She has a hand mixer for, and I know that that's all she has for Pesach. So
At least she doesn't have to do it by hand with a whisk. That would be quite a workout.
that our grandmother did that.
By hand with a whisk. That's right.
Yeah, a big wooden spoon.
Wow. All right.
Wooden spoon. She didn't do the mixer thing. It was all by hand. Okay, so we got the wet ingredients all done. Now I'm gonna put in matzah meal. Matzah cake meal, I'm sorry. This is the cake meal. So it's 2.5 cups of cake meal. And this I'm gonna go to the spoon for, because otherwise I'll be covered in this.
Yes. Maybe that was the secret to grandma's baking, was the wooden spoon.
I'm telling you, I don't know how she was this, our grandmother was this little woman, and she could mix this stuff up, and she just did it, and then she never exercised or did anything like that. But her arm, she managed to mix up all the recipes all by hand. As she got older, her daughters, my mother and her siblings, finally bought her a grater to grate the potatoes for potato latkes, which I proudly own. I think she still liked doing it by hand. It's definitely a different taste when you do potato latkes by hand than in the grater.
I was going to say, how did she grate potatoes by hand with the box grater, or she used a knife?
Oh no, she would use, I think it was a flat grater. It kind of like, looks like a window panes. I don't know if it was a box one, but all of the daughters, her 3 daughters, they all took turns grating potatoes when they had to be Passover. And then she would stand and fry for, like, you know, while we were reading the Haggadah. It was always, she was doing the frying. Matzah meal. Here's the matzah meal.
What?
Calling upon the sous chef.
Yes.
Don't burn yourself, Mr. Sous Chef.
He's still good.
Okay, so these are all combined, and now chocolate chips. And again, I always do this. I happen to like either the mini chocolate chips, or I like getting a really good quality chocolate bar, which you can usually get at Passover. You get some of the Swiss chocolate bars and grate them up or cut them into little pieces. Instead of doing chips, just do the flaked chocolate, which is really good too. But today I've got mini chocolate chips. And someone just tasted my brownies.
Oh, good.
Isn't that what grandma did with the chocolate? She used to shave the chocolate bar.
Yes, she did. That's probably where I got it. But if you take a chocolate bar and get a really sharp knife, and then you just kind of wedge it down until it keeps breaking up to small enough pieces. And you've got this. So the chocolate's important. Good quality chocolate in any baking is really important. This adds a great taste to it. And this
Have
is
you ever
all-
tried like milk chocolate versus dark chocolate or semi-sweet? Do you have a preference on that end of chocolate or even white chocolate?
Never white chocolate.
Okay, white chocolate's not chocolate in my book, but you know.
It's not chocolate. I am not a milk chocolate lover. So even my M&Ms, I search, I get dark chocolate M&Ms because I like dark chocolate. Semi-sweet chocolate or the dark chocolate is my preference. And now you can usually find most things in the dark chocolate. So the batter for the cookies is done. When I was making these last night, what I found, well, my sous chef is telling me they're too big.
You need to spray your cookie sheet, or these don't need to be
So
sprayed?
it says an ungreased cookie sheet,
Great.
okay? So, but I found that pressing them down makes them taste better because they are a sweet cookie. So when you make a relatively flat cookie, I thought the taste came out a lot better. And I'm just gonna pat them down with my finger. You can do the back of the spoon or a spatula or whatever else you like.
Is this a batter that will spread a lot as it cooks? So you need to leave a lot of room in between the cookies, or not so much?
And not so much, I was surprised when I was making them last night, because it says to put them 2 inches apart, and I expected a bigger spread, but I didn't get it. And I'll be honest with you, I made the cookies last night, and I made 1 tray of the cookies. And I had a lot of batter left over because I didn't want to start making tons of cookies. So I put the batter into the, I wrapped it up and I put it into the refrigerator. And I cut them up. I cut some of the batter up this morning. And that's what you'll see when instead of waiting for these to cook, I already got them all cooked. They're in the oven. I will show them to you. And they came out fine. So if you want to make the batter ahead, I don't think there's any problem with that either. You could do that. And then just cut them up and bake them up.
That's great. I think that a lot of people like to make as many things in advance as they can, so that
Yeah.
it's a little less, cumbersome the day of to have to try to fit everything in one day.
You know, and that's an interesting point because we grew up in a kosher home, and the dishes and the pots and everything would change for Passover. And so when I was working, I used to do it over a couple of nights, and I had help to get the kitchen ready for Passover. And people would tell me that they cooked stuff like a week before, and I was like, but then you're not using kosher for Passover pots and dishes. And it really kind of confused me a little bit that didn't feel right to me. But I know a lot of Orthodox people have a separate Passover kitchen. I used to work with a gentleman whose wife, her request in life was for him to build her a Passover kitchen, which he finally did. So that makes things, if you have that, a lot easier. Otherwise, you just have to work really fast. And that's what I would do. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, start getting stuff done. I try to do all my cutting of my onions and carrots, because you use tons of onions and carrots and eggs and stuff, and get those all into Ziploc bags so they were ready to go for the soup and for the fish and everything else. And then from there on, I always had 2 ovens, which made things easy. So, and you just keep going. And the carosas always seem to have been a last minute thing. And my aunt, who passed away, is no longer with us. She was the carosa maker for the family. And in my cookbook that Shari went and got, my Passover cookbook, there must be, I don't know, Shari, about 10 recipes for carosa.
Yes. And
Yeah.
carrot simmus.
So, okay, so we got
Yes.
this.
I wound up in the later years, I would help my aunt make the haroset. And I would taste it for her,
That's beyond the norm.
add a little more wine.
Do you make a traditional charoset with wine and walnuts and cinnamon?
Yes. And apples.
And apples, right?
The cookies.
Ta-da! The magic of TV in the microwave.
They normally would take about 15 minutes, but we didn't want to wait. So here they go. Here are the cookies. They look like real chocolate chip cookies. And I would go so far as to say, I think they would be super with ice cream in the middle, making an ice cream sandwich out of the cookies. They're really good cookies.
Sheryl, there's a theme going on with your love of ice cream.
You got that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing we're gonna do,
After Superstorm Sandy, Sheryl and Bob lived here because their house was affected, and it was so many nights. I put on weight when they lived here because it was like, I'm going for ice cream.
Sounds
There's
good
no
to
ice
me.
cream in the house.
macaroon.
Oh, beautiful. Those look nice. They browned out. What are you dipping them in?
Chocolate, melted chocolate chips.
How did you melt them?
I melted them over a water bath. I did can you see? Yeah, you can see that. So in here, I did this in here, the chocolates melted in here over a water bath. The other thing you could do is just take, and then to make them fancy,
Sprinkles.
look at that.
Beautiful. Now, can you use the same chocolate you used in the chocolate chip cookies for the macaroons, so you're not having to buy two different kinds of chocolate?
Absolutely. Absolutely, that's what I did. So, and the macaroons are really, really good. I like the
And gluten-free.
Yes.
That's a great comment. Absolutely. Listen, there's so many people who are always looking for gluten-free year-round recipes. And exactly, Shari being one of them. And so a lot of people tend to look at Passover recipes in general for gluten-free options because using potato starch, for example, right, is a big substitute in Passover baking.
Okay, so those are the three desserts, kid-friendly, relatively easy, kind of little bites that people can come and they don't have to start cutting up cake and making crumbs all over the place because there's definitely enough crumbs with Passover from all the matzah. So
Awesome.
And delicious.
enjoy, everyone.
Thank you so much. I want to thank Sheryl and Shari for their time today and sharing their amazing stories and these three awesome baking desserts that I'm going to attempt. I don't bake, I cook, but I'm going to attempt following a recipe. Sheryl, I have you on speed dial in case I need you.
We're leaving Florida. We're going up to New York for the Seder's, but you can always reach me on my cell phone.
Excellent. SOS. I want to thank you guys for coming. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing our postponed cooking session with Stephanie Atias. She's going to be making her Sephardic style stuffed cabbage, followed by our amazing breakfast with Stephanie Dalaboff, who on Tuesday, where she's going to be making some almond muffins and a frittata. So join us back for that. And again, thank you so much to Sheryl and to Shari for your time today.